What if I told you that one wrong sales hire, just one, can quietly cost your business over $250,000 before anyone notices? And no, I'm not talking from fraud or from bad intent, but from poor structure, wasted time, and chasing customers who were never right in the first place. And that's what we're talking about today on Marc Haine Live. Welcome to this episode of Marc Haine Live. Of course, this is where small business owners and entrepreneurs can pick up some hints, tricks and tips to create show-stopping, jaw-dropping experiences that your customers and your employees deserve. I am your host, customer and employee experience strategist, Marc Haine, and I'm really glad you're here today because my guest today is Glenn Poulos. And today we're going to be unpacking what it really takes to structure sales and sales teams that actually scale without burning through cash, confidence, or credibility. So, if this is your first time with us, I'd like to say, hey, welcome. It's nice to have you along for the ride. If you find this episode valuable, please feel free to check out the other past episodes. There is an absolute library of brilliance all through this channel. And if you haven't done so yet, please make sure that you subscribe to this podcast. That way you'll get notified every time I bring you fresh new content each and every week. So it'd be brilliant to have you along for that ride as well. And first and foremost, thank you for investing your time with us. It's nice to have you here. You know, sales is one of the few functions where we celebrate motion over progress, right? We're always kind of logging calls, tracking emails, going through the CRM and making sure there's tons of activity. Yet somehow we end up getting maybe fewer results. And we justify it by saying, hey, it's a numbers game. In my career, I've watched strong leaders blame effort when the real issue has been design. Sales teams weren't failing because people were lazy. They were really failing because the system was quietly working against them and work against their success. And once momentum is lost in sales, it's really, really expensive to get back. And that brings us to our question of the day. So, out of curiosity, how much of your sales team's time and energy is actually spent with the right customers? Are you sure? How do you know? I'd love for you to share your experience. Why don't you go ahead and share the link to this episode on your favorite social media platform, hashtag it Experience Leadership, and be part of this conversation. As I mentioned, my guest today is someone who doesn't just talk about scaling sales, he's done it multiple times in the real world with real payrolls and real pressure. Glenn Poulos is a three-time distribution company builder, former EVP and GM of NWS, and the author of Never Sit in the Lobby. Over 4 decades, Glenn has built and sold 2 companies, including one that surpassed $80 million in sales, and he is now doing it again in a new market with new technology in a new country. He also is a regular speaker and podcast guest, helping leaders avoid costly mistakes and help them to build sales engines that last. Glenn, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here.
So let's start off talking a little bit about what do you do and who do you do it for? Who are your clients and how do you help them?
So, for the last 40 years, I've sort of done the same thing, working in what I call wholesale distribution, selling high-tech electronic equipment. For most of it, it was in Canada, selling to the telecom space, helping companies build the wireless network in Canada. And for my third venture, I decided I wanted some warmer weather, so moved to Florida and bought a business in a similar kind of business, selling high-tech industrial electronics, but this time to the utility space, to the power utility space. So now I'm helping the U.S. Rebuild their power grid and take it to the next level to support data centers and the like. And
Nice.
but basically selling equipment. That's what I do.
Nice. And so let's talk a little bit about businesses who have sales teams. Why is it that most sales teams fail to scale at a rate that's sustainable for a business?
Well, I guess when it comes to scaling, you know, people often focus on the people first, and the way I like to say it is you have to focus on the structure first, people second, right? You got to get the right people in the right seat. And so you need to design your sales team around your territories, your products, your services, whatever they are. And then you need to look at what team you have available to you. Do you have the right people? Then yes, no, yes, you have them. Then fine, put them in the right seat. If not, you have to hire outside. But you don't want to do the old, who's in the room? All right, Jack, you've got the north. Bob, you've got the south. Divide it up because they've been around a long time, and you just want to keep everyone happy and give everyone a shot, right?
Hmm.
And I made that mistake, categorically quite a few times in my early days, and I called it the VP in the room theory, right? Where it's like, you're setting up these businesses and it's like, okay, well, you're in the room, so you get to be VP, you get to be a VP, you get to VP, and then Sally walks in, just to see how we're doing. It's like, oh, Sally, come on in, you can be a VP too, right? Because you're just here on the day that we're setting up the structure of our company, right? And and so yeah, so you got to build the structure, and then you got to put the right people in the right seats. So that's the short answer. We can of course dive in
Okay.
as much as you want. So
Sure. Sure. So when you think about the businesses that are out there that you've had that you've been able to help, what's the biggest structural mistakes leaders make when building their sales teams? You mentioned not putting people in places to design that structure, but what does that look like?
so uh, you know a lot of times the teams they don't scale properly, um, because the complexity grows faster than the clarity around the team that you're building, right? You're not
Mhm.
communicating properly, and you haven't set up the systems and to make the right decisions, and or you're too dependent on one or two people. You haven't empowered the right people to get the job done. So I call it like founder dependency,
Right.
right? And so if everything flows through one person, your growth is going to stall, right? And it not only is that in sales teams, but that's in the business itself, right? If you
Yes.
can't go on vacation, if you can't take any time off without the systems breaking down and falling apart, then your company won't scale, right? And I'm sort of, because I came from a business in Canada where we were $80 million and we had a large set of teams, but now I'm kind of immersed. My day to day is in a 13-person company, and so I'm living that dream sort of over again, right? So in my mind, I'm going back and forth between scaling when you're at a larger size and now scaling a small team, and I'm really having to walk the walk and talk the talk, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so a lot of times sales grow, but the process, the training, and the structures don't keep up with what you need in
Right.
order to onboard new people and stuff like that. So
You mentioned the
yeah.
phrase founders. We know that when you're in a startup, when you're a small business, that chances are, as the founder, the business is probably riding on your back. It's probably highly dependent on you to be because you are the founder. At what point should we be looking at taking our knowledge and then delegating it out so that the business doesn't stay dependent on us long term?
So yeah, so the I'm giggling because I'm kind of living this right now, right? So
Right, and
the
that's
whole
why it
idea
makes you
for
the
me is,
perfect person to talk
yeah,
about it.
like when you're the founder, I mean, the perfect world is when you're sort of the manager of all, and but you're not actually responsible for anything, right? Where you've replaced yourself in all the departments, in
Right.
sales, marketing, finance, operations, any other kind of departments that might exist depending upon the business that you've got, right? And so essentially, when you're a founder and you're a person of one, you're kind of in every seat, right? You're the
Right.
finance guy, you're also the sales guy and the marketing guy, and you pack the boxes, right?
Yes.
So what you need to do is you need to look at what do I do the worst in, right? And so for instance, maybe or that what do you like the least or the lowest value, right? So maybe you're literally packing boxes at night and putting labels on things. So then obviously you want to look at that. You've got some revenue coming in. You want to put somebody in the back in front in charge of operations to manage the order flow and stuff like that, right? Then you want to look and say, hey, you know, I like numbers, but I'm not that good at them. I'm not a CFO. I'm never going to be that guy. I just don't think that along those lines, right? So I got to get somebody into the finance seat that thinks accounting stuff, right? That's happy
Mhm.
just doing accounting all day long, making sure the chart of accounts is set up correctly and whatever. And you need to, and again, you got to look around the business and say, do I have the right person in the business to take over it? No, then you have to hire an accounting person, a bookkeeper,
Right.
director of finance. Depends on where you're at, numbers wise at that point, right? And slowly step back from each role
Mhm.
based on your competency and your desire to do that job, right?
Right. Would it be fair that, especially in sales, sales dependent businesses, that probably one of the hardest places for leaders to step back on is in the sales? I mean, when they've been wearing that one hat, they were the go-to person for everybody. And so now when you start bringing salespeople on, your customers start saying, well, let me talk to John. I know he's the CEO. Let me talk to John because he can make me a better deal.
That happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, having experienced it, there's not really any way around it. I There was a fellow, in Canada, John Tang, who I affectionately enjoyed selling to for years and years, right? And hopefully he doesn't mind me dropping his name, but nonetheless, he knew that we had gone from a one-man show to an 80-man show, and but still it didn't matter. Like and he didn't need a lot of complex stuff from us. It was really mundane electronic gizmos that he needed from us, right? But I had to do the heavy lifting, right? So there was an account manager assigned to this customer, large account, had a team involved, right? But when it came to this guy in this engineering department, I did the Christmas party, and I did the quotes and everything for him, and a lot of it, of course, I delegated the back end of, hey, can you find me this and that and whatever, and put it together. But I would do the last mile delivery, and there just was no way around it, right? Um, the only other and then in the other way, or the way it gets handled, is you kind of buddy call it with the right person, right? So the person would call, John would call and say, hey, I need a gizmo, and you give him the gizmo the first time. Then the second time you say, oh, I'm busy, John, I'm going to let Pat send you the gizmo thing. I don't want you to wait, right? And then
Mhm.
you kind of like train them slowly over time, right?
So
But there are
you
certain
wean them
people,
off you.
wean them off. Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? Like, John had this budget where they would come out of the blue, and they would spend a vast amount of money very, very quickly. And he was sort of super sensitive to being treated properly. And
Mhm.
so I didn't know if he wanted to buy $100 of like adapters, or he was outfitting 6 new stations, RF labs, right? That might be, 300
Hundreds of
grand,
thousands of
right?
dollars. Yeah, of course.
And
Yeah.
so I treated every deal like it was a major deal, and and it just always worked out. And I mean, it was that way right up until the day he retired, and
Yeah.
so much so that the restaurant we used to go to, after all those years, the restaurant actually went out of business, and then and it's finally like we're outliving the restaurants, we're outliving everything, but
That's
still,
awesome.
but no, yeah.
So you
Anyways,
mentioned
yeah.
about being able to delegate kind of responsibilities, and today we're talking more about this idea of having proper sales structures. How does a leader know that their salespeople are effective? Because the one thing I'm constantly hearing is, when I'm looking at the success rate of conversions for output versus getting actually into conversations, I get the whole, well, this is a numbers game. We expect that it'll take 100 calls to only get two people on the phone. And out of those two people, it'll take like 25 before one will actually buy from us, right? Like, people have these funky formulas, and we internalize these and think that these are all normal. Is there a test
Right.
out there to say, wait a second, maybe this isn't normal? Maybe your effectiveness needs to be needs to be, or our expectations need to be raised a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on what you're selling, and I mean, I'm not sure if subtly in there you're asking me if the person's the right person or not, or if you're just testing on the systems themselves. But effective salespeople, they do three things effectively, right? They prospect, they prepare, and they follow up without being reminded or coerced, right? You know, and you have to look at the leading indicators, right? So, are they adding qualified opportunities to the funnel? Are the deals moving through the funnel, right? Are next steps being defined? Are there notes in the system that, you can go and you can say, hey, there's activity there. And so the results sort of speak for themselves, right? And so if the activity is disciplined and the pipeline, is healthy, then the results would usually follow unless there's some market uh, pressure or something that's causing things to get stuck, right? And
Yeah.
so if activity is scattered and excuses are frequent, the numbers will reflect that, and they just don't. They're not good salespeople, right? And
Yeah.
it's funny, like it always pans out to be the same thing, right? Like the people that are producing are doing all the right things, and the people that are not producing are not doing the right things, but they're surprised that they're not getting the results, right? And you know they're kind of like the true definition of insanity. They keep doing the same thing over and over, well, not really. It's kind of a play on that words, right? They do the same thing over and over again, expecting to get not different results but better results, and but it doesn't happen because they're actually not doing the work, right? And when you
Right.
peel back the layers, you find that they're not making the calls, right? They're not getting out of the office, at the end of the day, so often it breaks down to people that are willing to do the basics versus people that are not willing to do the basics.
Hmm.
And they want to do it like from the comfort of their cockpit. They love the idea of being able to think they can do it all remotely. And I mean, I have this argument a lot with people about the veracity of how you can or can't do things virtually, right? Some things can definitely be done virtually, not
Hmm.
arguing that,
Yeah.
but I always challenge people about if you got so successful, like Grant Cardone, you had $50 million to drop on a jet, like he so often reminds us on his Instagram posts.
Hmm.
Do you think that Grant Cardone, when he bought that jet, do you think he went for a test drive and sat in the seats, or do you think he did it over Zoom, right?
Exactly.
Or right? And so that scales up and down universally, right? Sometimes you got to be in front of the customer, and the people that are not doing it are not when the leading indicators are not there, then it's no surprise that the numbers are not there, right?
So,
So
so what I'd love to do is I'd love to kind of take what we've just talked about now and lead into some solutions. I'd love to dive into what steps leaders can take to set up their sales force for success, but bigger than that, set up their sales system so that they have more awareness of where the weaknesses are and where they can bump it up so they can be more successful. And we'll get to that right after this.
When the spotlight shines on your business, are customers applauding or yawning? In other words, how is your business performing? Make your business a star with the new book, Lights, Camera, Action, Business Operational Excellence Through the Lens of Live Theater by Marc Haine. Marc uses his business and acting experience to help you see your business like a live show, so you can create a performance your customers will never forget. Buy Lights, Camera, Action today at your favorite online retailer or directly at marchaine.com.
Welcome back. I'm speaking with the author of Never Sit in the Lobby, Glenn Poulos. Glenn, before we get into solutions, tell us a little bit about your book. What's it all about?
it's called Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 tips on building a career in business and in sales. And it's really just it's a book where you can flip to any page, find a rule, one of my 57 tips. And in some cases, I'm telling you do this. And in other cases, I'm telling you don't do that. Right. And it's like the cheat code for, how to get ahead in sales and in business, right? Hiring the right people, how to behave, stuff like that. That's what it's all about. And I try to mix some humor in there for good measure, and so that the stories are memorable and you can call upon them when you need them most, right? So
Yes. Lovely. We talked about we kind of talked about the challenges that businesses were having and kind of how people are focused. If we step into some solutions right now, what steps can leaders
Sure.
take now to protect people's time and focus so that they're focused on the right thing at the right time?
Okay, so first step obviously is, well, it's not obviously, but I mean, the first step, you need to define the roles clearly, right? Everyone needs
Hmm.
to know who they own, who they're calling on, what's their territory. And they also then need to know how is success measured, right? Like you talked earlier about like calls and things in the funnel and getting, adding things to the pipeline and whatever. But how are we measuring success to you, right? And it might be deals closed, it might be growth in the funnel, it might be, but you want to have those metrics defined and measurable so you can measure it, so you can manage it, right? and
Hmm.
uh and and also who makes the decisions, right? Where the decision authority hierarchy begins and ends, right? Discount authorities are this, margin of allowances are that. What sort of flexibilities can be had at the sales level, manager, vice president, et cetera, right? So
Yes.
then you need to define your market. You need a clear market and a clear process for how you're going to do it. Like, what are the stages, right? Where it may be, you might have business development people doing, dialing for dollars, trying to get meetings set up. Then it's or you have these discovery calls. Then you have perhaps demonstrations, and these steps need to be mapped out for the product or service or whatever it is that you guys sell, right? And so and if you need to be able to map that out on one page, right? It's not like a novel of your process. It's meet, define, present, close, deliver, right? That kind of a thing, and whatever the subtleties of it are, right? Not too complex. So then you need to have a cadence for your meetings, right? You need to be able to have your one-on-ones with your sales manager and your sales person, but then you have to have a sales group, a sales team meeting, right? And these can be a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It depends on the business. It depends on a variety of things, right? But you want to have that meeting rhythm set. And as I like to say, you can miss the meeting for one of two things, right? And sort of it's like it's the if you're sick, right, and you're demonstrably sick, or for a funeral, right? But it has to be your own funeral, right? Those are the only two reasons that you can miss the meeting, right? And so, meaning it's not a like, oh, I got a call with Jack, and like, because you find that the sales guys are always dropping off. They've always got a meeting with Jack and they're not present, right? So be
Right.
present, depending upon the geography. If it's Zoom, cameras on, that kind of thing. Everyone's present, and you keep the meeting short, and you
And
keep
focused.
consistency, and yeah, and it keeps them aligned, right?
Yes.
And you
I
got to
would it be
measure those leading indicators. Yeah.
would it be fair to say that those meetings have to have a purpose? It can't just be this is our monthly meeting. This is a time that we get together and you know
Oh yeah.
I find that all too often we have these monthly meetings, but then after a while, the impetus for the meeting gets lost, and it becomes kind of like a check-in. So, Steve, how's your week? Great. Hey, Bob, how was
No,
your
no,
week?
no, no,
Right. So,
no,
so what
no,
what
no.
makes what makes a meeting a valuable use of time for both the organization and for the people attending?
So yeah, there is a set agenda, and I mean we had an agenda that we used. I mean, obviously it can vary somewhat, but for
Hmm.
the most part, most meetings would need to be the similar sort of a thing. So the first thing we do is we have a set of metrics that we look at, right? And we're tracking them and sort of displaying them week over week, right? And they are the leading indicators that we're monitoring, right? Like deals closed, right? Average deal size, new opportunities in the funnel, customer churn, you know, CAC, and depends on which kind of business you're in, what you're measuring, but you want to look at them and are they red or green, right? Meaning, are you hitting your numbers or not, red, green, et cetera. If you have like two or three reds in a row, then you want to be creating an issue about it, right? So after you've looked at the metrics, which you go through quickly, and it's just red or green, like there's no discussion about it at that point. If it's red and you want to make it an issue, make it an issue. Then you go on to the to-dos that came out of the week before. Did you do it or didn't you do it? It's not done. Okay, you make it an issue. Figure out why, right? Did you do it? Yep. Move on. And then, okay, what issues do we need to that you haven't created so far in the meeting format? Then those are defined. Then you add any items you want to talk about. Deal stuck because of this. You create your issues. Then you focus 80% of your time on those issues, right? Issues that were created looking at the numbers and the to-do list. Then you go through the issues. You create new to-dos, and you move on, close, and you go back to work, right? And you get in, you get out. And that's kind of the way, in a very, quickly stated manner, that's kind of how we did it. And we stuck and the meetings always start on time, end on time. There's no overing, there's no undering, there's no blathering on, what have you. And if you don't have any actions or items in the meeting, you don't belong there, right? So, there were these times, where people were like splitting territories and expanding things and whatever. It's like, oh, I'm going to hang around for a while in your meeting just to make sure that everyone's babied enough, right? Like, sort of like John Tang, right? Taking care of them, right? No, it's like, you're not the sales manager there anymore. Bob's taken over. Get out. You're not in the room. You don't have any to-dos. Get out, right?
Yes.
And or if I'm the sales manager, my boss wants to sit in and see how I'm going to do. No, I sit on your meeting. You don't sit in on mine, right? And so these I find to be extremely important subtleties of how you run weekly or bi-weekly kind of sales meetings, right?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So for the people tuning in that like this is making sense to them and they know that they have some weaknesses, they want to get in touch with you. How can they reach you if they want help?
So you can go to my website. There's a contact forms and what have you there, and all sorts of links to social media and stuff. I'm happy to respond in that manner, but also I'm extremely accessible and active on LinkedIn, and and that's where I welcome the most interactions and stuff like that. Connect with me there, and happy to talk to anybody that wants to chat.
Love it. Excellent. When people are defining their sales systems, how does one decide between direct and indirect sales models? Like what's the definitive kind of need that needs to be filled by each?
Well, okay. So for me, the difference between direct and indirect is when there's enough gross margin available to hire a guy direct and not and make money, you want to go direct, because you're pocketing the margin. And so there's a magic number where, each region would throw off a certain amount of gross margin, right? Because it doesn't matter what your top line is, because you might only be making 5% margin on the product, or maybe it's a low value item, but you make a lot of money on it, 50% margins, right? So when the margins are such that it can support a direct person times 2 kind of a thing, then I would go from being indirect to direct, because you can control the channel better, and you can, as a company, you're trying to maximize your money. And so you want to pay the person a proper wage to take care of that mature territory and keep the rest for the shareholders of the company. Right.
Sure.
And that's the long and the short of it. Sometimes it's kind of an ugly way to think about it. There are companies that just have an indirect model because of they may be international in scope, and they don't want to build a channel and all the supporting infrastructure in that country or something like that. And that's a little bit different. But when you're in the country, and the Northeast gets to $2 million in sales, you should probably have a direct guy on it, right? And
so by
you might
indirect.
Yeah.
Indirect, just for the people tuning in who might not know what indirect and direct means. But when you say indirect, we're looking at hiring brokerage firms or broker representatives.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the way I was interpreting your question, as direct
and that's
indirect.
The way. Yeah. I realized we hadn't defined it before I asked the question.
Yeah.
That's why it's like, we better define that a little bit.
Yeah. So indirect to me is where it's the channel is paid commission.
Yes.
Distribution is a broker implies sort of that they're buying and selling, and that's sort of a distribution model. That can be a strategy that's different than indirect, and because they perform the functions of credit and fulfillment, and they perform other logistical functions that a rep doesn't do, right? A rep just pounds the pavement and finds deals, and they
Yep.
get paid a commission when the deal happens, right?
Yes.
And whereas you still may need distributors out in the region because of the weight, size, maybe safety issues. Let's say you sell batteries, right? You're
Right.
going to need distributors all over the U.S. or you won't be able to get any business because you can't ship a battery from New York to California. It would be 10 times the price of the battery to ship it, right?
Right.
And so sometimes you need indirect channels in that manner. But, we already spoke about a direct guy versus a rep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your notes, you mentioned this idea of over the wall, like an over the wall thesis. How does this kind of line of first of all, what is it, and then how does it help teams simplify decision making?
So I normally when I think about the over the wall thesis, it's the one where about starting a business, and so maybe I might be misreading your question a little bit, but a lot of people ask me when is it time to start my company, right? And how do I go from being an entrepreneur or a 9 to 5 to an
Oh, I
entrepreneur?
see.
And let me ask you, is that the question you mean by getting
Well,
over the
so
wall, or
I just saw the this idea of over the wall thesis, and I thought, well, this
right?
is really an interesting phraseology, and that's why defining it and being able to say how this helps simplify decision making, I thought was the key.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the well, there is a thesis about over the wall. When a department finishes its job and throws it to the next team, and without ownership of the outcome, right? Or with ownership, and sales closes the deal, throws it over the wall to operations, then operations delivers and throws it over the wall to support, marketing generates the leads, and there's that kind of an idea behind it. But
Okay,
most of the time when people talk to me about the wall, I tell them about how you go from being a 9 to 5 to being an entrepreneur. It's one of my
gotcha.
favorite stories, but I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if there's time for it,
Yeah.
but
But
yeah.
I still like this idea that as people are scaling up, would it be fair to say that when you have kind of this over the wall um, system, that you start putting people into silos without accountability?
Yeah, the solution is getting shared ownership, right? Like, I mean, that's the goal that you want. You want people to care about the final outcome, right? And so you need clear handoffs, you need defined expectations, there has to be a feedback loop built in, right? So sales needs to care about delivery, operations, should understand the promises that were made and what have you. And it kind of goes back to the way the meetings are set up in my former company. We had a very robust system, and at each level, we got together weekly, right? Like the sales
Hmm.
manager met with his sales team, right? And then the sales managers were with a group of with the vice president of sales, right? And the VP of sales sat in a group with the leadership team, right? And so it was a VP of sales, VP of ops, VP of finance. And that's how we maintained this equilibrium between all the departments in terms of the feedback loop that was required to, hey, we're getting the deals, but you guys aren't delivering, right? And that's because the inventory guys, or the procurement and inventory management people, are not getting those orders out on time to make sure that the buckets are empty, right?
Hmm.
Like the whole Walmart concept, where it's the manufacturer's responsibility to make sure the bins at Walmart are never empty. It's not Walmart's problem, right? And so it's very, so that's why we structured the way we did, and we had these levels of meetings, and so that messages could flow through, all right? And we had a software system even that was involved, where someone in sales or any department could actually create a complaint, and it could cross report through the hierarchy of the meetings to get to the right team, right? And so, but it wasn't like the sales guy didn't like leap scotch 4 levels up and go talk to some guy. It was sent through the meeting system. They create an issue that needed to be delegated to another team, right? Then the team talked about the issue. Then they either dealt with it and sent it back, or they sent it to another team, right? And
Hmm.
we use a software system to track it, right, and to move it around.
So we're talking today specifically of this idea of kind of sales systems. We've actually kind of migrated into overall kind of operational excellence, as it were, because we're bringing everybody in, not just sales. Is there anything that we're missing from our conversations around sales systems that you think is integral for people who are whose businesses seem to be lacking, or even for people who are starting up where sales becomes is becoming a catalyst to success? Anything we're missing?
So, when it comes to sales, the biggest deals are made face to face, and that's the most important thing. And what people really push back on ever since, especially since the pandemic, is that trying to do it remotely. And yes, there are some things, some SaaS products and some other types of things that can be sold remotely. But even within those companies that are selling products online and doing virtual demos and the like, the big deals are not being done. Then the guy who's making all the money, or the gal that, the top earners in the sales team of those companies, they're definitely making sales calls, right? They're calling on the IBMs of the world and selling 10,000 seats, right? They're not doing that on a Zoom call, right? And so if you're building a company, it's not that virtual of a world, right? And that's the
Right.
thing, like, you can't be scared of it. Like, that's where the magic occurs, is when the customer and you get face to face, right? And that's actually selling. Everything else is marketing, right? So
There you go.
figure out which department you want to work in and apply for that job, right?
Yeah. It's
So
interesting because I train professional speakers and I book professional speakers, and it always behooves me when I'm talking to speakers and go, well, no, I'm just going to send emails for my cold outreach, because it's
yeah,
faster, and then they're surprised when they get no response at all. Because
none.
we know
Yeah.
that when it comes down to emails, our first thing that we do every single day is we go through and start delete, 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 right? And we're getting rid of anything
Yeah.
that we didn't ask for, or anything that doesn't apply to us in the immediate need. And so, and yet at the same token, every time I am picking up the phone and actually calling people, I can't tell you how many times somebody says, "Thank you so much for making the call. It's so rare. I get emails like crazy, and I always think they're spam, but I'm so glad you actually
Right.
called me." And so
Right.
what's
Right.
going on that we're so afraid now to make calls? Is it just because we want to see the numbers? You mentioned lead metrics. The more outreach we make, the higher maybe our success will be, but we focus so quick on the quick kind of non-committed emails rather than actually doing the physical work.
Yeah. So I always caution people not to use their own self. That's probably not proper English, but use their own self as a marketing a piece of information, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's not valid marketing data. What you do, right? And so, but the main reason why people don't make the calls is because either they're scared or they're lazy, right? And that's really the bottom line. And the email sending the email, send it and forget it, is a lot easier to do, and there's no fear involved, and they don't have to push on any of their boundaries of that make them feel uncomfortable, right? But that's not where any of the magic happens, and you know and I'm learning, in terms of now having to grow a small business back up, or not back up, but from a small back to the kind of company that I had that I sold in Canada, that you quickly see, like, when you hire the right people, and you say to them, well, what's going on with that deal, at IBM, right? He's like, well, I talked to him last week. I got a meeting with him next week. I'm going golfing with the director in a couple of weeks. Like, all that sounds amazing, and that's perfect. Like, that's like a perfect symphony going off, right? The other guy is like, oh, well, I sent him an email, and he didn't respond, right? And I'm like, okay, did you call him? And he's like, oh yeah, I called him, but I got his voicemail, right? And I'm like, so I'm like, okay. And so basically, he emailed him and he didn't reply back. He called him and he didn't phone back, right? So you haven't talked to the guy, right? You don't know what's going on, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing over and over with this guy, but the other guy's always out golfing, or something like that, with the right people, at the right level of the customers that are appropriate, in his territory. And that's what I'm trying to say is like, if you I think it's Jamie Dimon or whatever. He's got a clip on the internet that I have saved on my phone, and I play it over and over again. And he says your problem is like shitty people. Pardon. Oh, sorry, that'll probably have to get bleeped out. Sorry about that. But
Not at all.
is
We're not
difficult
cable.
people. Yeah.
It's interesting because the as you were talking, it made me think about, so this is not necessarily about sales. This is about relationship building.
Oh yeah. And rapport building, true, genuine rapport, right? And shameless plug, there is a couple of good chapters on rapport building in my book.
Nice, nice. Hey, I'd like to, for people tuning in, I'd like, I'm always afraid people will get this information and it'll become the new policy of the month. From now on, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take all our people golfing. And so I'd like to
right,
talk,
yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about some pitfalls and cautionaries, and we'll get to that right after this.
When you're delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's easy to lose your place or go way over time. Give yourself an advantage with the Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app. No more checking your watch or calling for time. The Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app keeps you on track with easy-to-see timers, even changing color for visual prompts during your speech. And you can set audio cues to practice, or set it to vibrate so you don't even have to look. Be the pro you know you are. Download the app at speakerpresentationtimer.com.
Welcome back. I hope you're getting tons of value from today's episode. As you can tell, Glenn and I are passionate about today's topic. And if you belong to an organization that could use our help, or you might be planning a leadership retreat or a conference and you need some high octane thought leadership, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to explore how we could be of service to you and your people. Our contact information is in the show notes. Feel free to reach out. We can help hopefully make it better for you. So Glenn, when we think about having to step into making changes, we know that we're not fulfilling our best outcomes. What small, consistent changes should we be doing, and what does that look like as far as sales execution is concerned?
Well, you constantly want to be measuring, your results, and like measuring out how many emails you're doing versus how many phone calls you're doing versus, days on the road in front of customers, and tweaking that, right? And really it's a constant give and take of against the results that you get, right? And I'm not really sure what more to say other than that. And the top sales guy is always tweaking his approach, right? Especially with the different kinds of personalities. They can walk in a room with one person and their methodology, they're talking about basketball or something like that or whatever, and then they and then they walk into another guy's from Europe and it's like, I only play football and I'm talking about soccer. You know what I mean? And so you can't always rely on doing things the same way with every person, right?
So again, it boils down to relationship building, right? And rapport building.
Absolutely. And genuine rapport, right? Which is something that I really harp on. And again, I love calling, shameless plug, right? I call it implied familiarity also breeds contempt, right? It's one of my favorite chapters in the book, right? And what it means, is that by becoming over familiar with a person too early on is a really bad look, right? And everything I do and say kind of in the book and in my own day-to-day is how to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And one of them is avoiding things that are not a good look, right? And so, there's the whole idea, about golfing or something like that. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, right? But what if the guy hates golf? Like, and you're inviting a guy to golf and he doesn't even like golfing, and maybe he feels like, kind of less than that. He's not an avid golfer like everyone else, and he feels like a loser or something because of that, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're triggering all of these like negative feelings inside of a person because you didn't take time to genuinely get to know them, right? And so we have a great little trick we use called watch your weekend problem, right? And which is a way to break down and establish rapport with someone that you don't know, right? And just quickly to get it out, because it's a great tip and takeaway for people. It's called watch your weekend problem, right? And so you start off by commenting and complimenting them on their watch, right? Most people have a watch or a brooch or some kind of a nice, piece of jewelry or, accoutrement or something on them, right? And you say, oh, what's the story behind that watch? That's cool, right? Or that brooch or necklace or whatever, right? And they're always willing to sort of tell, oh yeah, my wife gave it to me, or I got it for 40 years on the job or whatever. Oh, that's amazing, and then and unlike saying no, I always tell people don't ask people how their weekend was, but I say to people like, hey, when Friday finally rolls around, you get to go home for the weekend. What do you like to do? What do you do on the weekend that's not working? Right. And that's when they start to tell you like, oh, maybe maybe I play pickleball, maybe I golf, maybe I fish, maybe I play games, I'm a gamer, whatever. Right. And you start to figure things out. Right. And then you say to them, oh, okay, cool. And then, and now you're starting to establish a bit of a proper conversation. And then you say, well, when you finally come back to work on Monday, what's the biggest problem you guys are facing here, right? At Acme, manufacturing, right? And so it's watch your weekend problem. And that's a way of establishing and getting, information that you need, but figuring out, hey, I'm not going to invite this guy to golf because he's a pickleball guy, right? Or he's a fisherman, right? And so, those are some tricks that we use to to build it, right? The other thing is using your ears twice as much as your mouth, right? God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you do the math, right? And you should be listening twice as much as you're talking.
Love that. Love that. As we talk about and head into kind of cautionaries and pitfalls, as people are looking to make changes, what are some cautionaries you would advise as far as them wanting to make a change that will positively impact their sales teams?
So, yeah. So one thing that you have to understand about change is that, there's all of the descriptors and dialogue, which I'll go into some of it in a minute. But the one thing I want to reinforce with everyone is even if the change was you're all getting a raise, everyone's still going to be upset with you, right? Like it doesn't matter because the fact of change itself is annoying. Right. And like, I've never had a situation where we gave raises and things like that, where a whole bunch of people weren't upset. Right. And people like, that's impossible. How could they be upset? They're getting more money or whatever. Right. And there's a million reasons. Like no point in going into them. Right. But you got to realize that you're going to make changes. People are going to be upset. It's how you manage the change. Right. That's most important. Right. And that change must occur. Right. So you need to make sure that, look, yeah, this is the way we used to do it, but we're putting in a new system. We're going all in, right? The CEO is behind it, et cetera, top down. We're all in, right? So, and then you need some clarity, right? And so these are the reasons why we're putting in the new system. This is what we hope to get out of the system before you start, adopting it, like, so sort of clarity before motion kind of thing, right? And so, and you're going to define what's going to change, why you're changing it, and make sure it's not vague and it's very specific and you can speak to it and that you've given it the thought and that you've made a decision, right? People like to get behind decisions, right? And when you make specific changes and you can sort of articulate them and what have you, people will become aligned behind it because most people want to follow a leader that seems to know what they're doing, right? Like, okay, this guy seems to know what he's doing. We're heading in the right direction. I'm going to fall in line. Right? There's going to be the one guy who's going to bitch and moan about it no matter what. And you got to work your magic with him. And eventually he kind of capitulates, or in some cases you just Jamie Dimond him, which is you basically have to replace him. Right. Yeah. And because he might be a top performer, but he's dragging down your other top performers with his bad attitude. So he doesn't align with your core values. Right. And so he's not a top performer. Right. And so
I love that you've just redefined what a top performer is.
Oh, right. Well, yeah. And they got to produce results, but be in line with your core values, right?
Yeah. Not that they're creating the toxic work environment to get to the top, to become the top salesperson. As we wrap up, Glenn, do you have any last thoughts about what we've been talking about today?
Well, just that if you're thinking of going into sales, it's the best cheat code for making a lot of money that you can, that you can find, right? Like, because you can, brain surgeons and whatever, they can make $1 million a year, but they had to go to school for 14 years and all their residency. And whereas you could actually go from 60K in sales, you could jump to 200K your next year in sales and be at 400. It's the only job that kind of rewards you sort of for, other than sports or entertainment, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that rewards you just for having a talent and a commitment to the job. You could be the best accountant in the building, but the pay scales for accountants are 70 to 110,
Right.
unless you're the CFO and he gets a little bit more, right? But
Right.
sales is like, I call it a cheat code, right? And you don't need a 14-year college degree or anything like that, right? And so you just need to love your products and do the next right thing, and you can really get ahead. And so it's a great opportunity for anyone. And it's
I
worked out
love
for
that.
me for the
And
last 40
and really
years.
at
So
the end of the day, all you really have to do is just care. You just have to care about your clients, right?
yeah,
And delivering what they need.
yeah,
This has been
yeah.
fantastic conversation, Glenn. Could you remind everybody how they can get a hold of you one more time?
But they can go to glennpoulos.com or just go to Glenn Poulos on LinkedIn and just connect with me there and fire me questions or connections, what have you, and happy to chat.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for doing this show. It's been great having you.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
And thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions about today's episode or you would like a complimentary 30-minute brainstorming session with you and your team, feel free to reach out. You can book yourself anytime on my online calendar. The link is in the show notes. It's the one that's marked meetwith.marchaine.com. As always, I am at your service. If you need help, please feel free to reach out, and feel free to reach out to Glenn. If you have a sales team that is new and emerging and so on, and you need a little bit of help, pick up Glenn's book. Reach out to Glenn, get some real expert advice to help you so you avoid all the pitfalls and the issues that come along with growing your team. And if you haven't done so yet, please make sure that you subscribe to this podcast. You'll get notifications when I bring fresh new episodes each and every week. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. My name is Marc Haine. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you dare to be the exception. Bye for now.